All right, everyone. U.S. paranoia about drugs is the war that never goes away, the moral panic that refuses to die. They've trotted out the latest wave of reefer madness. Partially, it's, well, more people are using more and more powerful weed and weed products, which is not entirely untrue. There's definitely an effort in the relatively unregulated segment of the marijuana industry, which shouldn't exist at all, by the way. I'll explain my views on legalize it versus decriminalize it separately. It's definitely the case in some of the more underground smoke shops. Not that that really causes a problem. The idea that the weed is so much more powerful now than when I was a kid, man, that sounds like nostalgic boomerism. Well, our Acapulco Gold back in the day, man, I was watching Cheech and Chong and it was great, man. But now, man, the weed's all poison, man. I agree with you on one aspect of that. That is that the government came in, legalized it for medical purposes effectively. At the federal level, that's a hands-off sort of thing, and numerous states have legalized it in some form or another. Most of them have not deregulated it and simply said, look, if someone wants to grow a weed plant, if they want to smoke weed with their friends, it's not a menace to society. Instead, they said, no, you have to buy it at a smoke shop. But the government is the one entity, by the way, which can take marijuana or any other drug and make it unprofitable through regulation where it is applicable. Like in the state of California, actual weed businesses are leaving. They're going to other, pun intended, greener pastures because what happens is people undercut the legal market with technically illegal off-the-street weed, which people can actually afford. And so if you're a cancer patient in California, you just as likely going to the alley as you are to the dispensary. The state of California is very concerned about getting its tax money for giving people drugs that used to put people in prison and enslave them for having. Kamala and people like that, and Biden too with his 94 bill, did play a role in this, by the way. So when they pretend that it's all good and everyone should be hip and mellow and chill, man, just remember the long and storied history of the Democrats actually leading the charge to throw people into prison for such things. They also led the charge on music labels and warnings and shit on TV and censoring all forms of media. They're still doing that to this day. Now we have schizo weed. The idea, and it's been spoken of before for many years actually, but now it's coming to the forefront because the other arguments are beginning to fail to try to, put people in jail for smoking a plant. And so now their big thing is, well, weed causes schizophrenia. There's a huge causal link between the two. Yeah, there's a link between being schizophrenic, latently or otherwise, and smoking marijuana. In some cases, people smoke marijuana when they're schizophrenic to help ease their symptoms. In other cases, they're taking antipsychotics, which can cause what? Anhedonia, and so naturally something that tends to make you giggle might be helpful to treat some of those side effects. Schizophrenia can cause anxiety. Some people mellow out when they smoke weed. I'm not one of them, by the way. I can't use marijuana or anything like that anymore because I had an overdose. This is why I know what anhedonia is like. After my overdose, I suffered with it for about 6 months solid and then on and off for a further year or two. And I feel sorry for people that have a condition that can cause that when they actually take their medication. It must be hell. To be clear, there is no causal link between using marijuana and developing schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is not completely understood, and it would be just as fine as a theory, and in fact I endorse it, to say that people who have latent schizophrenic tendencies, so they may or may not develop schizophrenia, are simply more likely to use marijuana. They're also much more likely to smoke tobacco, again, partially for the anti-anxiety benefits, if you can use the term, that are imparted by nicotine. Simulating acetylcholine and so forth in the brain, stress reduction. That's something that tobacco will do. I mean, you get addicted to it, then you have to smoke more and more, but it's easy to get addicted when it is, at least for some time, effectively treating some aspects of your condition. You'll find that people that suffer from a broad variety of different mental illnesses, again, insofar as you can use that term in a proper context, and substance abuse, ADHD, People who bounce from thing to thing may want to slow down at some point. They are more likely to take up the bottle. They are more likely to smoke. They are to improve focus. They're more likely to abuse their Ritalin and so forth. And the government doles that out constantly to people. No research into the long-term harmful effects of that or what that may cause now is there. I think that therapy and meditation are more effective for some people, but we don't do that. We'd rather just hand people bottles of pills. So I'd like to point out that despite the fact that we can establish a link between marijuana usage and schizophrenia, we can also look at it from the reverse perspective that they're proposing. They're proposing, hey, if you smoke, you're more likely to start hearing voices in your head. We've got no evidence whatsoever that latent schizophrenia can be anything other than maybe triggered by long-term marijuana usage. That's a possibility. It's a possible theorem. It's also possible that people with that genetic tendency, if indeed genetic it is, will abuse substances because they may have underlying behavioral abnormalities before they ever have a psych breakdown. If that's the case, it would be fundamentally a good hypothesis to say, well, it's because they've got other effects on them even when they're not showing full-blown schizophrenia, and so they're effectively self-medicating. They simply have they're more likely to have an addictive personality. So I don't see any problem with this. It's the same Reefer Madness bullshit. As far as legalize it versus decriminalize it, I'm on the latter team, and have been for a number of years. Of course, it's fine to sing about legalize it, but legalizing it means taxing it. Legalizing it means regulating it. Legalize it means still throwing people in prison because they used the drug the wrong way, the way the government didn't want them to use it. Or they sold the drug, they made profit and they did it under the table. Or they made profit and they competed with the monopolistic corporate interests that are buying up land to grow pot right now. Like John Boehner, former member of Congress, quite literally, he left and he immediately switched to marijuana farming. I can't imagine how much money he's made at this point on that business endeavor. Not that being in Congress for a protracted period of time doesn't get you tens of millions in ill-gotten gains, but then when you roll them over into a nice, lucrative, monopolistic pot farm, the only one that's allowed to operate probably in the county or something, yeah, that's lucrative. You've got monopolistic company town-style control over the drug products that people are using. You then end up having to compete with the black market, which is just the free market suppressed or algorithmically distorted, which is what we see in corporate all the time. DC loves its buddies. They don't care how they make their money. They're willing to sell you beer, as we've seen. They're willing to sell you liquor. They're willing to sell you wine, and all things fine. Marijuana is one of them. By the way, they don't really... I don't think that any of the actual public officials take this to account and really care about it. Oh, weed triggered someone's schizophrenia. Well, now we can make money selling them antipsychotics. They'd love to do that. If there were a causal link between smoking weed and actually developing a significant mental illness, they'd be pushing weed on us 10 times more. I just find it funny when members of the Democratic Party, like Fetterman, had the 420 flag there that obviously fucking got off eBay the day before, and it was still all crimped and everything, pretending, well, marijuana is so great, man. He probably does smoke marijuana. I can believe that, considering his level of coherence is between 0 and none on any given day. We'll be talking about Fetterman later and the lowered expectations of the United States public. It's partially their fault, you'll see. It's funny because they put probably tens of millions of people in jail for simple possession over the years. Yeah, you're the progressive party of smoke it and toke it. Yeah, I believe that completely. Makes a whole lot of sense. So no, don't worry, and many of you probably use weed. There is no established causal link between smoking marijuana and developing schizophrenia. If anything, the only link that they can establish is that you are more likely to display eventually symptoms of schizophrenia if you have smoked weed for a protracted period of time and were already latently given over towards developing schizophrenia. That's the only causal link, and even that doesn't tell the full story. Could it be that people who are more likely to develop full-blown schizophrenia are, again, more likely to have an addictive personality and become habituated to the usage of marijuana? That's never explored, because that wouldn't allow them to sell more products. It wouldn't scare people into giving them more power. That's how the system works. Fiddling around, again, lies, damn lies, and statistics. It's all about how you interpret the data. That's about all. Peace out.